am here with, as they say in church, the illustrious pastor of the Mount Pleasant Baptist Church in Northwest Washington, D.C., Pastor Terry Streeter. How you doing, my friend?
Doing fine, man.
Pastor Terry Streeter is one of God's greatest preachers in this country, and he's one of God's greatest leaders in this area. I've seen him commandeer a room of strong-willed preachers, and he's not just that, but he's a preacher's preacher, and he's a great pastor and great person. I thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, let's talk about your upbringing, how you got started. How did you, when was it, at the time you realized you were called to preach?
Well, I actually grew up in church. The church was my life. Mm-hmm. I was assistant superintendent of Sunday school when I was 12 years old.
Wow!
And sang in a quartet as a teenager and so forth. People had always said that there was something special about me. Even in the second grade, I remember the principal of our school giving me a stern talking to about life, but said that there was something special about you. I tried hard to get away from the idea of preaching and all that. I liked basketball and girls and all the other things.
Did you play basketball?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
But it was something that I really couldn't get away from, and so that day came when I finally yielded to the Lord. And what was so interesting about it, I went to talk to my pastor about it, and he said, I told him that I felt that I was being called to preach. And he said, well, that's good, go back and pray. He didn't really understand what it took for me to get to that point.
Right.
But when I came back and to him and told him that I'm sure about it, and there was no question. And so when I started preaching in February of 1974.
How old were you?
Oh, 22.
Oh, okay. So when'd you go to seminary?
Well, I went to Washington Bible College.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, so you were preaching, then you went to Washington Bible College, and then, I mean, how'd you become a pastor? Like, what was that process like?
Well, I was going to a school called Black Churchmen's Ecumenical Institute at the time, and L. Allen Bridges was also a student there. He was pastor of New Canaan Baptist, and he asked me to fill in for him one Sunday. And I went just as a young preacher to fill in, and not knowing that he would soon leave that church.
Wow.
And they didn't even know what my name was, but they remembered me from and that I was from Mount Pleasant Baptist, and I was the youth minister there. And so they called me over, and the rest was history.
How long did you stay at New Canaan?
11 and a half years.
Wow, and then you got called to Mount Pleasant.
Called back to my home church.
Called back to Mount Pleasant.
Yes.
That is, and how long have you been pastor of Mount Pleasant?
It'll be 29 years in November.
Wow. So what are some of the challenges you faced as a young minister, being a pastor of a church, New Canaan and or Mount Pleasant, that you can remember?
Well, going to New Canaan, of course, this was my first church. And I was full of ideas and so forth. And I think the thing that helped me was having grown up in the rural. The core group was from South Carolina, and a lot of the things that they talked about, I understood because it was similar to my own upbringing. And so we sort of connected, and again, church became our life. New Canaan was a real magical time for me.
Wow.
It's really hard to explain. People who were there during that time that we'd have 4 or 5 services a Sunday.
What?
And yeah, we'd go everywhere in the sticks. Wherever we were invited, we went.
That's a different time. People get on the church bus and go to afternoon service. Yeah. Different time than today.
Yeah.
How have you adjusted to the changing climate? I would call the impatient Christian now that comes to church and wants to be out in an hour and a half, 2 hours. How have you adjusted?
Well, I don't preach as long as I used to, but age did that. No, but seriously, our 2 services, one of the things people come for is the word. And even though they enjoy the music and so forth, we try to major on the word, and I try to preach in a fashion where they can put legs on the word. I preach in an outline fashion. They can go back home and study it again, and tell others about it. I try to be simple. When I studied Jesus had what I call profound simplicity. A sower went out to sow.
Right.
And his messages were so simple but yet profound. And I try to duplicate that profound simplicity. So.
Well, let's get into sermon prep. That kind of segues in it. How do you prepare for a sermon?
Well, I tend to preach in series, and like I just finished preaching through the 39th Psalm.
Okay.
And when you preach in series, whether it's through a book or a shorter passage, you begin with an idea of the whole passage, and also your preparation is not just for that coming week, but you're ahead because you started by outlining the chapter and so forth, and you get the whole idea of it. And then you move from there, and so you've got an overwhelming theme, and you don't have the Saturday night press of what you're going to preach, because you know next week you're at the next verse, and I found that preaching through series, and I do 2 different series a week, that when you preach a series, the people get engaged, and sometimes they're a little ahead of you. They can't wait till you get to a certain verse because they've always wondered what does this verse mean, and so forth. And so it helps to build a congregation and keep them Bible literate.
Wow, you have an intelligent congregation, and that's to your credit. You know, they come looking for preaching.
Right.
I find that to be the case at Mount Sinai as well. Pastor Queen, he's a teacher preacher. You know, he's very, very calculated in how he guides us through the Word. Who are some of your preaching heroes?
Well, when I was as a young preacher, I always wanted to preach biblically. And we were having a good time at New Canaan. They'd kick the benches over, but somehow during the week, people their lives weren't changing, and I prayed to the Lord, there's got to be something else. At Washington Bible College, I saw kids go out doing evangelism week, and they were going in the neighborhoods and getting decisions for the Lord that we weren't getting. And so as I prayed, A. Lewis Patterson came to town.
Wow.
And I sat and I listened. For once, here's a guy that took the Word. All of his points came directly from the Word, and so forth. And I went back every day to hear him. And he and E.K. Bailey were 2 of the people that made the greatest impact on my life. Both of them were great friends of mine. They're going on to be with the Lord now. But those 2 guys with biblical expository preaching made a difference in my life.
I know as growing up, I heard a lot about you. You were known as the evangelist. You know, you could draw them in, but you also know as a great storyteller. Where do you get your stories from?
Well, as a youth minister at Mount Pleasant, during that time we had a children's church, and I was the preacher there, and preaching to children. You tell stories.
Right.
But what I noticed was that adults were coming to the children's church. And so if I told a story about a horse or a pig or something, the adults went out and said, man, that was a great horse, or, that was a great pig. Right. And the adults were talking about the stories that I told. And so I said, wow, this method that I used on children also worked on adults. And so that's how I got into storytelling. Yeah,
you got one almost for every occasion. I applaud you for that. 'Cause I love it. I can tell when you're wrapping it up and when you got something to kind of bring it home. And then I'm like, this is brilliant. I love it. Let's talk about Sam Kendrick, your minister of music.
Okay.
And your relationship with him and how it has lasted almost 20 years. I was telling you off camera that is rare in our city. It's rare across the country. But how have you all existed for that long?
Well, it's funny that it doesn't seem like it's been that long. Sam and I have just gotten along. I didn't really know who Sam Kendrick was. Isaiah Thomas was our minister of music, and he left. And so we were looking, and a lady who used to play at the church where Sam was said, you ought to try this guy. And so he came in and he auditioned, and of course I acted like I knew what he was doing.
Right.
He played some classical pieces and some other things, and I could read music a little bit and all. I played trombone in the band and all that. So but I liked him, and we just sort of clicked, and he has made a tremendous difference in our music. His mark is on it. I don't overburden him in music, and that's his area. But if there are things that I want, or songs that I think that we can do, we talk about it. He's even put music to some things I've written.
That's wonderful. That's a great. That's when you know you got a great relationship going on.
Yeah. So we actually have a lot of fun, and while people talk about how rare it is, to me it's just normal. We've just had that kind of relationship. Wow. And I know that Sam could probably go other places and maybe earn more money than us, but I try to give him the freedom to do other things too, and all that, and it just works for us.
Look, on behalf of every musician in the city, thank you. Last but not least, let's talk about your family. Your wife and your children.
Okay.
Let's give a shout out to them real quick.
Oh yeah, to Cheryl and Daniel and our other children, Katrina and Chris and Nikki.
Wow.
We have 4 children and 5 grandchildren.
Wow, so you have a full life.
Yes.
Christmas is something else around your household, isn't it?
Yeah, well, all 3 of them are grown. The little guy is only 7.
So you have to save as much as you once did.
Well, the little guy is a bit much. when you're my age and you have a 7-year-old.
Yes, Lord. Well, thank you so much for being on this show. I really appreciate it. Thank you for opening up yourself about the about the preaching and about the church and all of that. Big shout out to Mount Pleasant Baptist Church. It's a great church. Every time I come there, I have a great time.
Thank you.
And look forward to fellowshipping with you. Of course, we work together with the Citywide Revival and some other things. And you've been very supportive of me down through the years. I just want to thank you for that as well.
Yeah, I feel old because I remember you as a teenager.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Terry Streeter.
For more information on how to become a guest on Real Talk with Philip Carter, or for general inquiries, please email us at realtalkwithphilipcarter@yahoo.com. Tune in next Monday for another edition of Real Talk with Philip Carter.